The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, greatly considered to be the best Western film of all time, if not the best film in cinema as a whole. I mean, you know it's a classic when so many other pieces of media reference it themselves. But what makes it such a classic? How did a spoof of classic westerns at the time become more well known than the films it was flipping on their heads? Hollywood westerns were the peak of the genre at the time, and Hollywood westerns featured very clean-cut, moral protagonists, while the villains were very one-sided and mainly evil for the sake of being evil. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly subvert these expectations, with main characters that barely have morals, if even. The main motivation of each member of the trio is greed, although they manifest it in different ways. In this video, we're going to take a dive in each one of these characters, breaking them down and determining their motivations. With that out of the way, let's get into it. The man with no name, or Blondie, in this film is noted to be the good of the three characters. A taciturn, confident bounty hunter that's masterful with a gun. He's introduced to the audience, turning in Tuco to the sheriff for a bounty, only to rescue Tuco minutes later. He's a conniving man, not opposed to breaking the law and saving a few scoundrels in exchange for some cash. However, Blondie is more goal-oriented as opposed to sadistic or genuinely heartless. You'll notice that he really only kills others if his or his mate's life is in danger, or if they get in the way of his goal. For instance, in Blondie's opening scene, he saves Tuco's life from a ragtag gang of bounty hunters. Blondie doesn't kill them out of the goodness of his heart for Tuco. He kills them because he can't really make money off of Tuco if Tuco is dead. After all, he could have either killed Tuco and turned him in for a one-time payment, or he could have kept him alive and squeezed multiple bounty payouts out of Tuco. That's not to say that Blondie doesn't have a heart at all. While witnessing a Civil War battle, Blondie remarks at all the lives going to waste, feeling some sort of empathy for them. Later, he finds a dying soldier and, in the soldier's dying breaths, gives him his cigarrillo and poncho for comfort. To conclude this section, while he is indeed motivated by greed and willing to break a few laws and a few fingers, Blondie does have a moral code and has a variety of pet the dog moments, showing genuine compassion for those in sad situations. So I want you to take everything I said about Blondie and throw it out the window for this guy. Angel Eyes is the absolute antithesis of Blondie, being sadistic and sociopathic, doing anything he needs to in order to achieve his goal. Not to mention, he's kind of the opposite of chivalrous. This man clearly earns the title, The Bad. The most painful example of this is when he is disguising as a Union soldier in order to get leads on Bill Carson. He forces the prisoners of war to play cheerful fiddle music, while the poor soldiers in the background are being brutally tortured. He's also not afraid to ruthlessly torture Tuco to try and get information out of him. Something interesting to note here is that Angel Eyes makes a comment that he's not going to beat information out of Blondie, as he knows that Blondie's not going to break. This shows the intelligence and calculation of Angel Eyes. He's not going to waste energy or strength if it's not going to help him achieve anything. The only semblance of a moral code that Angel Eyes has is in regards to contracted killings.
When I'm paid, I always see the job through.
Angel Eyes is introduced to the audience by having dinner with a man he was hired to kill. In a feeble attempt to save his life, the man tries to offer money to Angel Eyes to kill the guy who hired him. Angel Eyes takes the money, however, he still kills his target. It is worth noting that he turned around and killed his contractor as well, although that doesn't really say much good about him, quite frankly. Overall, Angel Eyes is a man fueled not only by greed, but also sadism. Unlike Blondie, he is not shown to have any sympathy for anyone, not really, and will cross any line he needs in order to get richer. Angel Eyes is not somebody to mess with, and if you dare hire him, you better pray that his victim doesn't have any money to pay him with. Last, but certainly not least, we have Tuco, who is arguably the true protagonist of the story, deemed to be the ugly. Of the three, Tuco is the most developed, with his family life being fleshed out much more than Blondie or Angel Eyes. Something curious to know here is that he is the only character referred to by his actual name. Blondie and Angel Eyes are only referred to by their aliases, because last I checked, Blondie is not something you legally named your kid. I believe this shows that Tuco has the most sense of self compared to the other two. Tuco is introduced to the audience, running out of a window with a turkey leg and a tablecloth shoved down his shirt. Tuco is very much a comic relief character, evidenced by the fact that he does not stop yapping. While he may be a goof, Tuco is not somebody to underestimate. Blondie made the mistake of doing just that, and he paid by being forced to trek through the desert whilst being severely dehydrated. Tuco is very vindictive, and he's driven by his past to some extent. A lesser example is that with Blondie, but in the scene with his brother, we receive insight into his family life and childhood. Tuco remarks that in this world, you only get ahead by becoming a bandit or a priest. There's an implication that Tuco uses this to lie to himself. His brother calls him out for leaving behind not just his mother and father, but his wife and children too, for this life of crime of his. This gets to Tuco, as he's a bit more quiet in the next scene. A nickname through Tuco throughout the film is the Rat, although it's not used quite as much as Tuco. And that holds true a little too much. Not only is he vulgar and resourceful, just like an animal, he also embodies the alternative meaning of rat by flip-flopping sides a lot with Blondie. He's very willing to see Blondie die in a very painful and torturous sense, but he cozies up to Blondie and pretends to be his best friend when he learns of Bill Carson and the gold. In summary, Tuco is led by greed in an animalistic sense. He doesn't exactly have the heart to be genuinely sadistic to others like Angel Eyes, but it's not in his nature to show compassion to others either, like Blondie. He's resourceful and cunning, much like his title of Rat. To close this video, the good, the bad, and the ugly loves to play with moral grays when it comes to its characters. None of the three characters are squeaky clean like the protagonist of the Hollywood westerns popular at the time, but they are all lesser evils of somebody else. Maybe with the exception of Angel Eyes. All three characters are motivated by greed, but they express it in different ways. Blondie is taciturn and skillful, but usually doesn't interfere with non-outlaws or those who don't deserve it in some sense. Angel Eyes is willing to do practically anything, and there's some suggestion that he enjoys this. His greed enthralls him. Tuco is basically an animal, thinking of only himself and going off instinct, but he's not really soulless enough to practice genuine malice. This film is a case study on how to write morally gray characters, and the good, the bad, and the ugly wholeheartedly deserves the golden honor of being one of the best films of all time.